Welcome to Nancy's Classic Bedtime Stories. Tonight's classic read, Let Us Talk of Many Things by William F. Buckley, Jr., The Collected Speeches, The Artist as Aggressor, an address to a welcome to New York rally sponsored by Aware, the ballroom of the New Yorker Hotel, New York, August 15th, 1955. Until National Review came into being, my papers were scattered, and no speeches survived from 1953 to 54. During that time, the Korean War had ended in stalemate. General MacArthur had been fired and was now a diffident candidate for president. Senator McCarthy had risen and fallen. The anti-communist movement had suffered from McCarthy's disgrace but wasn't moribund. In New York, an organization called Aware was formed to give support to the House Committee on Un-American Activities and to a Hollywood group that sought to identify and resist fellow travelers. This speech was to a rally welcoming the chairman of the House Committee, Francis E. Walter, and members of the committee to New York City, where they would be continuing their investigation of communists and fellow travelers in the entertainment industry. Mr. William Schlemm wrote a year ago that the essence of what we have learned in 5,000 years about the nature of man is that the inviolable sovereignty of that person presupposes his inseparable responsibility for the position he takes, even wrong ones. Yet now, the liberals in effect insisting that man is morally a vegetable and intellectually an eternal child. The intellectual scandal of the day centers on the frightening frivolousness of the position, which holds that man's choices signify nothing, that on his walks through the valley of decisions, man picks and discards commitments with the abandon of Peter Pan picking daisies. In dealing with artists, the liberal is particularly dogmatic in his insistence that men be not taken seriously. If a politician or a professor should be lightly let off for joining communist fronts, an artist is almost to be commended for doing so. The artist is entitled to especial immunities, given the fact that his interest in politics is avocational and his knowledge of politics correspondingly inexpert. On top of that, any liberal will tell you it is unfair to retaliate against an artist in his capacity as an artist for what he does after hours, so to speak, in his capacity as a citizen. That is an appalling argument, but irrelevant. The fellow traveling artist upon whom anti-communists train their sights has not generally been the man who is content to indulge his political passions discreetly in his capacity as a private citizen. Rather, he is the man who trades upon his artistic reputation to advance his political objectives. When Paul Robeson emerges as a high official in the National Council on Soviet Friendship, or Larry Adler comes up sponsoring the Joint Anti-Fascist Refugee Committee, it is a brazen fact that Robeson has not been selected for so high a position because of his renown as a master of Soviet-American diplomatic history, and that Adler cannot be assumed to know with the precision that sets him apart from other men just what fascism is all about. In other words, it is clear to those who gave Paul Robeson and Larry Adler their posts, and it is clear to the community at large, and it should be very, very clear to Mr. Robeson and Mr. Adler that their occupancy of politically significant positions arises exclusively from the fact that the one is a very able singer and the other a very able harmonica player. More precisely, their occupancy of those positions arises from the fact that in the course of singing and playing, these men acquired a public reputation and hence a public following. And in splashily joining a political organization, the artist is inviting the community, which honors him as an artist, to give sympathetic attention to the objectives of the organization. What is the community to do? How is it to resist the aggressors? Yes, the artist is the aggressor. He initiated a political gesture that cannot, if human beings are to be taken seriously, be ignored, but must be accepted or rejected. The politician who announces his support of communism meets up with professional political opposition backed by those in the community who reject communism. Pro-communist publicists, newspapermen, radio commentators, columnists are replaced by newspapermen, radio commentators, and columnists who are, at least, ritualistic, anti-communist. But what is to be done with the artist who consciously commits his artistic self to a partisan political cause? The orthodox resistance measure, the backing of the competitor, is only sometimes applicable. In the nature of things, some artists are irreplaceable. Who is to replace Charles Chaplin? One legitimately and even apprehensively asks. No one is the somber answer. Hence, we must ask ourselves, do we abhor the aggressive political identity of Charles Chaplin enough to deny ourselves the pleasures of his genius? The answer is not an easy one. Decisions must be individually made. Many artists back political causes which, while we may disapprove of them, are not in themselves morally objectionable. With such artists, we can agree to coexist, but with others, with men and women who ally themselves with the movement, which aims at overturning the bases of society, we cannot negotiate. There are higher values than art. The Sistine Chapel is not as valuable as a single human life. The pro-communist artist, as the willing or unwilling agent of a revolutionary system, must, if he insists on it, be dealt with as a human being rather than as an artist. Good night.